All right. So let me introduce Dimitri. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your last name correctly, Dimitri. I'm going to give it a try. Dimitri Erikin, is that
Yeah,
right? Erikin
right.
is a research scholar in the Cooperation and Transformative Governance Research Group of the IIASA Advanced Systems Analysis Program. He has a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Bonn, master's degree from Vienna University of Economics and Business, and a PhD in international business taxation from Vienna University of Economics and Business. So I know you're also linked through LinkedIn, so people can find out more about you through that. So Dimitri, I'm going to turn it over to you for 45 minutes. At the end of that, or close to the end of that, we can take some questions. I may ask some questions, and we'll go from there. And thank you for being with us. And we see your screen. It looks very nice. It's a beautiful building there.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. So it's a great pleasure for me to participate and to tell you a bit more about our research and about digital traces for peace. So, and it's really great to speak after Jeanette because I think I will address also some of the issues that she had raised in her presentation. So, I'm a research scholar of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, and here you can see also a photo of the institute. So it's located in a Habsburg castle from the 18th century. And I will also tell you a little bit more about the institute during my presentation. So in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to focus on the questions of what changed in peace building and humanitarian careers in the last year, in particular with respect to digitalization, to the use of artificial intelligence, what new pathways are opening at the intersection of data, technology, and peace, and what should young professionals be doing now to be prepared for new pathways in peace building. And we deal with digital data not only as something technical, but as something that can create a practical bridge between listening, analyzing, coming into dialogue, and acting. So several facts of what has changed with respect to artificial intelligence and humanitarianism. A recent survey shows that about 70% of people working as humanitarians use AI on a daily or weekly basis, but only 3.5% do it on an expert level. So it means there is a huge gap between everyday use of artificial intelligence and we use it as an expert. At the same time, we have a vast amount of big data across different humanitarian operations, including also non-traditional kinds of data, which allows us also to use the data, to analyze the data, and to take data-driven decisions or to make data-driven policy advice. Also, we see that peace work is going more digital. We see an increased demand for skills around, for example, online resilience. So how to build a trustworthy online place, online space. Also, skills in combating misinformation, in fact checking. And there is also a special aspect of science diplomacy, which I will also share with you. And our institute, its main goal is science diplomacy. So in brief terms, we could think of issues that touch many different countries, like climate change, for example, that cannot be solved by any one particular country or any one particular discipline. So we really need dialogue. And even between conflicting states, like we can think of several examples where border countries have conflicts, but they have the same river systems, they have the same mountain system, the same forests. And so they bear the same also risks and the same risk of disasters. And so cooperation in these fields could contribute also to a peace in other domains. And so the implication of that for students would be that working with international affairs only is not enough anymore. And so such skills as data literacy, communication literacy, platform literacy are useful skills. So going further, what are the pathways that emerge for young professionals using this data field. So we could think of first information management. So how to turn messy, so it means unorganized data, and make them visually attractive. So we could think of dashboards, where we can have nice figures that immediately summarize important messages, allow us to track different things over time across regions. We could think of policy briefs, where we are able to translate research into short, concise messages with recommendations, with policy implications, because typically policymakers are very busy people and we don't have much time to go in depth into the details. Also, different coordination products. The next one would be misinformation and trust. So now we live, unfortunately, in a very polarized societies, and we can use the data to identify different conflicting narratives and to try also to figure out how to resolve that. Early warning and foresight. So we can see some discussions emerging. And there are cases in recent history which showed, for example, that violence from online can go to offline, like in some Asian context, but not only Asian context, when some misinformation led to real world violence. So that kind of work with data could also give us early warning signals of what is going on. Also, civic tech and dialogue. Today, participation is very important. Participation in policy processes, for example, through consultations, but also even going further to the delegation of power when different groups of stakeholders also have the power, the opportunity to act. And also science policy and diplomacy, when we are able to translate science into policies, so into outputs, which can then be used by ministries, international organizations, and also research institutes. So what do we mean under digital traces? So we could think of different kinds of data like search queries, social media discussions, video comments. Then we have AI analysis in the middle, which can analyze what kind of narratives are being discussed, how it is developing over time. And I will show you also a practical example later on. And from that, we can draw many issues, like I've mentioned, early warning. So we can see that some issues are emerging, like some violence-related issues towards, for example, some minority groups. And we can, if we know that, we can also be proactive and not react once the situation has already happened. Misinformation detection, also quite a big issue nowadays. Also dialogue support. So when we see how some issues are perceived, so how they are discussed, we can also act accordingly. We can also adjust our communication and see maybe what is missing and what we should address more. And why it matters today? Because it is fast, so data is fast, and so there is even this term of infodemics when we had the pandemics and the information around it was moving online so fast that we had a vast amount of data and both credible information, but also misinformation. And it also led to misbehavior and had negative consequences for some people. It is cross-border, so data knows and information knows no borders, and it can make us more proactive. So what would the pipeline look like? So first we listen, so we see what is being discussed, how it's being discussed, how it changes over time. Then we can detect some spikes, for example, in fear. We can see that there is some fear growing, or anger, or rumors, or misinformation. Then we interpret, so we add local context. So maybe we see so there are some realities. To give you an example, the local context matters really a lot, and I think it reflects on the points that David and Jeanette also raised about language, but it's more about culture. So we did research where we looked at how misinformation is perceived and how methods of combating misinformation are perceived across different cultures. And we found huge differences, for example, between collectivist societies and individualist societies. Like, to give you an example, in some societies, it is okay when you say to someone you're wrong, or just when you correct some piece of information, say, well, it is wrong, it is how it should be. But in others, you cannot do that because you have the concept of losing face, and you cannot do it that directly. So the next step would be using evidence to support dialogue, trying to interpret, and then the final step would be to respond, so to adapt messages. So several practical ways of applying the pipeline would be, for example, anticipating escalation and identifying where narratives are hardening. So as I mentioned, if we see some violence against some groups, so we can identify it and react early on, countering misinformation that undermines trust and social cohesion. And the problem of misinformation is also that at some point people may stop believing something because there is so much misinformation around. And also bringing empirical evidence into science policy and science diplomacy conversations. We could think broader that kind of data as a complement to traditional ways of, for example, surveying people, of conducting polls. And of course, online data is, as a limitation, is not representative, so it is limited only to the set of, so it's self-selected, somehow is limited to the set of people who are discussing, for example, something online, but it can give us a good complement to traditional ways of serving people, and also up-to-date and current and good in from the terms of speed. So what skills matter? So it's at the, so to say, I would say at the bottom, it's the tech skill itself. So how you use different tools, and so how you interpret, for example, findings you get. So the second one would be the context. So you need to be able to understand and to interpret the findings you get from the data. So to also tell why something is happening, why it's happening in country A or not in country B or something like that, or why some issues are more important for this particular group than for the other. And the third important aspect, and I think it has also been addressed today, is ethics. So of course it's very such a field. And so here we need to be very careful in terms of so ethics, so how data is handled, in terms of security, so how data is stored, in terms of bias. So we need to, for example, using AI, we need to understand that there is bias in the systems. But I will also talk a bit more about it later on. So the skills rising faster, first, of course, AI and big data. So how to work with big data. And now it's possible to get data from any kinds of platforms, like to give you an example, I have so the digital services taxes is a big topic, and I have a colleague who analyzed Amazon data to find out what was the effect of digital services taxes on prices. So you can do a lot of things with working with online data. Of course, technological literacy. So, for example, Python. So some, but again, now also with the help of AI, you can acquire these skills very fast. Analytical thinking to see the interconnections between different issues, to be able to interpret them. Also, what matters now a lot, so it's not enough to conduct research on its own. So the impact matters a lot. So you need really to be able to show so where the impact of my research is, so how it may impact, for example, an industry or the policy decisions. And curiosity and lifelong learning. So because nowadays things are changing so fast that it's, I think, like 20 years ago, it was much different, and it would be maybe some issues would be difficult to imagine that they will be like they are today. And fortunately and unfortunately, I would say both, it is also changing a lot. And we also see that, for example, AI is substituting many jobs, like translators, what has been mentioned. So we need to be up to date. So to summarize this slide, we need to be able to work with the data. So we need to know the technologies to be able to use them, but at the same time, we need enough humanity to not misuse it. So we need to keep ethical aspects of it. So what should young professionals be doing? As an example, and best it would be to combine methods and practice. And for example, you could think of bringing uh, some case study into your portfolio. You could think of some topic of some research question and identify what kind of data you can extract for this particular topic. Then try out different tools so to see how you can work with the data. So how you can visualize it, or maybe if you have the skills, also conduct some statistical exercises with it. So it would be kind of a practice step. Of course, you need also courses for example, humanitarian action, media literacy, conflict analysis, regional studies, also depending on your question and on your research field to be able to add context. So it's not enough to extract the data, to use some tech to handle it. So you need to be able to interpret, to explain it. And many universities, many institutes, they offer different space, and also many NGOs, they offer spaces for that in terms of fellowships, internships, student labs. So you could look for opportunities maybe at the place where you study or at the place where you live, or also internationally, and try to find some practical things. So telling now a bit more about the institute I'm working in. The International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis is located in the city of Luxembourg in Austria. It's about 15 kilometers away from the capital city of Vienna. And the institute was founded in 1972 as a place for scientific dialogue, so for science diplomacy between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. So actually during the Cold War, and it was actually founded before the Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe. And the idea was to have, because also Austria is a neutral country, and so idea was to have a space, a neutral space in a neutral country where researchers from, so to say, East and West could meet and work on different issues that go beyond borders, like climate change or water security or forests or transportation routes. So actually any kind of questions. And the institute, after the end, so to say, of the Cold War, the institute remained. So it's now structured as an international organization. So we have member states, and also the good thing about it that we have also member states which are in a conflicting state. For example, we have United States, we have Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, China, Sub-Saharan Africa, and others. And the main idea is that researchers from different states work together on global problems that are crucial for everyone. And so we have social scientists, we have engineers, we have natural scientists. So it's very also interdisciplinary. And so it's the setting. Maybe for some of you who look for opportunities, especially if you are PhD students from all over the world, each year the Institute organizes a summer program which lasts 3 months, so from June, July, August. And you need to apply about 1 year in advance. So I think the next application period will be like in October, November. So you apply with the research project you're going to conduct. So you get funding for 3 months, especially if you're from one of the member states. So, for example, when you are from the US, and then you work 3 months on this project under supervision of the researchers from the institute, you also have a lot of courses, a lot of events in a very international environment. So I think there are about 50 people each year. Also, the institute organizes summer schools for students, and you can also check the website for opportunities because it's very international, and especially if you are from one of the member states, then also for those who already finished their PhDs, there are postdoctoral programs where you also get paid for, I think, like 3 years, and you have the opportunity to conduct your research in the institute. So my research at this intersection, so I work with different kinds of online data, so the main idea how we can use it for different social problems, we could summarize it that way. So, for example, for disaster risk resilience or for climate change, to give you an example, I was studying the reactions on the earthquake which happened in Syria and Turkey in February 2023, a major earthquake. And some people, actually many people, they were discussing a conspiracy theory behind the earthquake, that the earthquake was a secret, produced by secret US weapon to control weather. And the problem of it is that it does not only remain as a narrative, it also has implications for the real world reactions, because it also has an impact on your feeling of urgency. So that's the reason why it's also important to identify different narratives like that. So to study online behavior, to gather some empirical signals for better communication, foresight, and also policy dialogue. And now I will give you a practical example. Actually, I presented it last year in Singapore. So where I analyzed online discourse about peace in different Asian languages, and with the help of AI, because I do not speak any of these languages, so it also builds on what Jeanette was telling us. So I looked so I took YouTube as a platform because there are also limitations. Some platforms, it is easy to use. You have API access, so where you can officially get the right from the platform to work with the data. For some platforms, it doesn't work. So the idea was to look at these 8 languages: Bengali, Filipino, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, Malay, Thai, Vietnamese, and to see how people discuss peace in these languages. So the idea was to collect their discussions, then to analyze in terms of different aspects, like, for example, sentiment, emotions, narratives, toxicity, and then to compare it across languages and to see what we can learn from that. So one idea would be, one expectation could be, well, all of them are the same, but the good thing is that the discussions were actually very much different, and so it shows us a very nice aspect of how we could use it also in our approach, also take into account cultural values, maybe knowing more about cultural values also from that kind of exercises. And here to stress, AI does not replace human in it. It helps us as a tool, so to analyze, because it would not be possible to do it manually, like hundreds of thousands of data points in different languages. And also it's far more better than traditional approaches, so how people used to do it before. But still, we need human expertise to be able to see the context, to interpret it, and to draw some lessons. So to briefly summarize the study, so looking at the videos, so mainly and also in general, most of the discourse was pro-peace. I think it's a good thing. Of course, there was also joyful discussions, which is also quite expected. But still, there was a small share. It was about 3% of video content which was hostile fringe. So these were videos mostly sharing misinformation, negative sentiment, negative emotions, high level of toxicity. And the bad thing about it was, so to say, that also these were the videos which gained on average more attention than other videos. So it was only a small share, but it gained a lot of attention. And also another example from the data was looking at the emotions and narratives. So here on the right, you can see some of the things which differed a lot across the language context. So, for example, I could identify that in Bengali discussions, devotion and spirituality played a huge role. In Japanese, historical memory. In Thai, nostalgia and emotion. Vietnamese, pride and patriotism. So, and it means we can also learn something from our approaches. Like if you want to talk about peace with Japanese people, then taking devotion and spirituality would maybe not work. Or if you want to talk with Thai people, then maybe we should not take pride and patriotism. So it's just an illustration from the data. So I think the paper is going to be published this year. But some lessons we can learn from the broad analysis is that we do not only need to broadcast peace, but we should also listen how peace is being framed by different publics. So how it is being framed by different cultures, by different groups of stakeholders, by different societies. Then we should use locally resonant emotions and formats. So if you want to be effective and if you want also to find readiness for dialogue on the other side, then we also need to know the cultural aspects of our counterparts and be also able to bring this into the discussion. And also, I think it's also a huge debate. So, and of course, we should not somehow limit online discussion or so. And we see from this data that it was only a small share, which was very negative, very toxic. So, and a better way would be to think of maybe how to address it in terms of promoting a positive discourse and positive dialogue. So, what kind of roles, career roles, can this work with data lead to? So, we could think of humanitarian information or data analyst. So, it would be a person who can clean data, visualize trends, brief teams clearly. So, you are able to extract the data, structure the data, and present the data. Digital peace building or misinformation analyst, so someone working with narratives and recommending responses, because there are different ways of like pre-banking misinformation, debunking, or some media literacy courses. So there are a lot of opportunities. Research assistant conflict media platform studies. So you're able to handle multilingual content, mixed methods. So also work cross-disciplinary, science policy, science diplomacy. So you are able, it's also like communication field. So you are able to translate science into policy, science into public, so science into media, so that you can take complex scientific papers and make them accessible, understandable to a wider audience. Risk communication, stakeholder engagement, analysts. So you can, it's also nowadays very important that you can work and engage different groups of stakeholders. What recruiters look for, so and what you could do to improve your portfolio. So you could demonstrate one real project, so and be able to tell about it. You need to show that you follow the principles of ethics, so that you are aware of different ethical limitations. Multilingual conference, I would say that still it's quite important if you work in a multilingual context, and it would be still good to speak foreign languages, and also ability to explain findings without jargon, so to communicate your research broadly. Portfolio plan. So what you could do, for example, you could select one tool, learn how to use it, play around with it. Then you can pick one issue which you're interested in. It could be some local conflict. It would be some global topic like climate change. And you can apply the tool that you have learned. You can apply it to this particular case that you have selected. And then you can publish one output. It can be a short policy brief, or it can be a poster or a blog or a dashboard if you are more advanced. And it really depends also on the area in which you're working. And then you can test it socially. So you can present it. I think for students, there are multiple opportunities at your university, at some research seminars, at conferences. Also, NGOs offer or different labs. And you can have also these outputs as part of your portfolio. So it could be a one-page brief. So it shows it's nowadays it's often also a requirement that you also share, well, of course, depending on the role, but that you share some kind of research that you have authored, that you have conducted. And especially if you're beginning your career, you may not have something published yet, but still it would be good if you can do something on your own and you're able to present it. And of course, you should be able to prepare policy briefs, but methodology is also important. So given AI, some may just use it to conduct research, to write codes and methodology, but still working on a professional level, you should also be able to explain your methodology. So why you have come to this particular conclusion, how you have come to this particular conclusion, what kind of data you have used, what kind of methods you have used. So you should be also able to add it. And of course, reflection on limitations. And here are some of them which you need to be aware of when working with the data. Of course, privacy and consent. So it's a very such an issue that there are also different opinions about that. But here you must be very careful. So you need to handle it anonymously. So it's not so that we do not track any person's discourse, or that we do not want to stigmatize any groups or any any groups of people or any groups of stakeholders. Interpretation, of course, AI is helpful, and research shows that AI is better than the tools we used previously. But still, you should be aware of false positives when AI mislabels something, misnuance, sarcasm, work with local languages. Representation, we should be aware of that it's only a subpopulation and it's self-selection. So if you comment on something online, you self-select into this group of people. So it is not necessarily representative of the whole population. And also user practice, you should be very well aware that the goal of it is better communication, prevention, and support for dialogue. So coming to the conclusion, I would like to say that I would say that the future of peace building, especially with respect to this data angle, is are people who are able to work with data, so who are able to extract data and work with the data, dialogue, and diplomacy, and who can stay ethical, humble, and useful while doing it. So you should be able to explain why you're doing, how you're doing it, but also be transparent about your limitations. And if some of you, I think, would like or have also ideas for some cases, or would like to work on some particular case, would like maybe to course something, or need advice, or have some questions about the topic or about the institute and its opportunities, I will be very glad to answer to your questions and share some insights. And would like to thank you once again for inviting me, and also to the audience for being here. Thank you very much.
Dimitri, that was fascinating. And I've got some questions, and then I want to make sure folks put in their questions in the chat, in the Q&A, wherever they want to do it. The last word I wrote down was sarcasm. And I'm always struck by AI, and I think you kind of demonstrated this, is that AI has a function, but there's a shortcoming when it comes to language, right? And AI doesn't understand sarcasm, maybe in other ways. And it also reminds me of the word peace, right? Like we have all seen that poster where it's peace in multiple language, peace, pax, mir, right? All these different words. And I think our mind puts equivalency to all those words. But the reality is those words don't mean the same, right? And we always understand that they don't mean the same. Peace for some people is pure, nonviolent, pacifistic ways, and peace for other people means peace through strength. But I think you brought even more attention in thinking about that. And you had a slide about kind of, the role of spirituality in some and tradition in some cultures and so forth, that really giving meaning to that. So I thought that was fascinating. The thing I want to dig in a little bit more is talking about career roles, right? I mean, it used to be, kind of in my generation, is that if you did peace work or conflict work or whatever, you came from the social sciences, right? Your degree was in area studies. I mean, I worked at the U.S. Institute of Peace. I don't remember ever running into somebody that had a biology degree or a mathematics degree or a statistics degree. There was nobody there who had that. They had these social science degrees. And what you're suggesting is the future is going to look very different with the people that come and populate and the backgrounds that they have. Is that follow about? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say it's really what I also observe, especially when we think of some areas like you mentioned also climate change. And if you work in the field of climate change, and it's also part of peace, like climate resilience, and
Mhm.
because also on your first point that how we define peace, and I would say of course it's much broader. It's not only that we say peace when we have no war. It's much broader, and if we work in climate change field, I think first it was also that mostly have people with environmental science background, but now you work together with economists, with those who studied political sciences, with those like biologists, environmentalists, but also with those who studied communication
Right.
sciences. So it's getting very interdisciplinary and also very multidisciplinary. And I would say it's also what is valued a lot now when you um, apply for projects like in Europe, the major funded the European Commission. And when they fund project, it's also one of the issues they look at, so that you are a really interdisciplinary team, but that you also show how the different disciplines work together. So
Yeah.
and it's what is valued a lot now, also from what I observe, and also at our institute.
And the other thing that you're suggesting that I think we always have to emphasize, it's the intersectionality of areas and disciplines. I mentioned this last night, and it's just interesting to recall that 30 years ago we thought of migration and we thought about climate change. We didn't think much about it 30 years ago. We never would have believed there was an intersectionality between those two, right? And now the intersectionality is so important, right? The way climate is affecting migration. And we're seeing AI is going to create that intersectionality also, right? That we're going to see this intersectionality, and that's the space we need to be in, right? To be in that fissure, right? In that space, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I also think one field for the future now, it's being discussed, but maybe it's underestimated. So AI is already substituting a lot of jobs, and it's likely to continue. And of course, if it's done on a small scale, that it does not have it has, of course, huge consequences for individuals who suffer from that, but maybe not from the society as a whole. But when it is done on a large scale, then it may also lead to social conflicts, so to increase of violence. And it's also a topic that we should discuss, and we should also be prepared and also think how we can solve that. So I think it's also one of the future field for peace work. So how we deal with that change in the role of machine and human beings in the society, so to avoid potential conflicts.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the chat. There have been some questions or some observations in the chat. I'm not going to identify the person. I'll just read the question, but you can see it all too. I have been using conflict data sets with various softwares to monitor and analyze conflicts, but a key challenge has been getting access to real-time or recent data and having to pay to get access to most recent data. What are the challenges that you and your organization encounter on your side, and how have you been dealing with them?
Thank you. It's a very important and valid point. So to give the example of online data, so there are some platforms that give access to their data for free. So for example, Google. So if you want to work with search queries, you can get the data for free. Or like YouTube, if you want to collect data, or of course you have certain limits, like on the so how many videos you can extract, how many comments, and so on. But still, you can access the data for free. Not all the platforms do that. So there are some platforms that require payments for that, and it's quite expensive. And then there are some platforms that prohibit the use of their data in research. And it's a really major issue. So in Europe, it was handled at the level of the European Commission. So, and they introduced, I think quite recently, they have introduced a requirement for online digital platforms that if they work in the European Union, they have to provide access to vetted researchers for free. So you need to apply through the Commission webpage. You need to identify what is your research, so what is your research question, what kind of data you need, why you need that kind of data, and then you should be able, so if your application is successful, then you should be able to get the data for free. But otherwise, I agree that it's an issue, and it also creates kind of a bias, because if you can only access every time, like to give you an example, if you look for papers, so for research papers that do that kind of analysis, you will find that most of the papers used Twitter, because it used to give access for free. So now it's not the case anymore. So now you have to pay for that. And you see immediately that the number of papers using X now has declined almost to zero, because now it's very expensive. But at the same time, it creates a bias then, because I would say different platforms have different audiences, or different data, or in general, different data bases, they cover different aspects. So ideally, you should be able to work across also data sets.
Yeah, I mean the democratization of data, right? That is accessible to everyone, creates more truth, we would say, right? Because once you create bias, you don't have reality, right? And it's right. Let's just go look at a couple more questions here. One person talked about languages. She practices various languages, and her French and Spanish, her French and Italian are getting stronger. She can read a newspaper. Do I need to wait to be fluent in a language before considering working overseas, or does the multitude of languages or does a multitude of languages also have benefits? So let's talk about the value of speaking languages, and is that changing?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's a benefit. And if you look, for example, Vienna has has many different international organizations, so including the United Nations or the Atomic Agency or Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, Organization for Cooperation for Security and Cooperation Europe, and many others. And if you, for example, look for jobs in these organizations, so what you would see is that all of them, of course, demand high level of proficiency in English, but they all have knowledge of foreign languages as an asset. And in particular, with French, so most of these are UN languages, but most of these are like French, Arabic, Chinese,
Mm.
Spanish, Russian. So these are the languages. And also depends if you tell that you know Italian, then there are also many opportunities in Italy, and I think the Italian research institutes, they're now eager to find people from abroad, and of course it would be an asset for you also to try to look for something in Italy.
It's interesting the way the interest in language shifts. I remember growing up in the 1970s United States, the most popular language that people were learning in the 1970s, foreign language, was Russian in the 1970s United States. Spanish, French, they were down there. And then when the Cold War ended, I think a lot of people didn't think they needed to learn Russian anymore. I know Europeans thought that way. I spent some time living in Estonia, and Estonians would say, Estonians wanted to learn English, they want to learn Russian. And now people are learning Russian again, right? And in Chinese, nobody thought about learning Chinese, and now everyone's learning Chinese. So you, the people who get ahead of all of that position themselves better, and learning the language that's going to be necessary in 5 years, that type of thing. All right. The only other, I have another question here. One question person asked, and I don't know if it was answered. You had put in your talking about your, I'm going to call them fellowships or your grants, and that's not limited by age, right? You said you had a kind of a young scientist program and so forth, or do you have like age limitations for some of these things?
To be honest, I'm not sure, but I think the main idea is that you are the PhD
Okay.
level. So
Okay.
that's the main,
Yeah.
because it's counted also then for the postdoc, it's a certain amount of years after finishing your PhD. So I think it's not very much tied to the age.
Okay. Okay. Great. Any other questions? We're at about 15 minutes of the hour. We can take a break now, which we want to thank Dimitris for spending his time coming in from Austria. Anything anybody else wants to throw out there question wise? Dimitri, can you put your contact information in the chat to
Yeah,
everyone?
sure, we'll do now.
That would bring. And we'll take a break now. Dimitri, thank you for being with us. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for we will post this on YouTube. You are more than welcome to stay the rest of the day and listen in on other panelists. Like I said, it's at the hour where I am, it's 10 o'clock. We will introduce the next group of presenters, Anasa Ari and Farida Abraham at 10 o'clock. So if people want to step out for a few minutes and take a walk, enjoy the morning, the afternoon, the evening, go feed their cat, whatever they need to do. We'll come back in about, 10 minutes now, and I'll come back a little bit before then. And thank you, Dimitri, and thank you, everyone.